Alvin Bragg and the Manhattan DA's office now file to take Trump's case, which he wants in federal court, and bring it back down into state court. Remember, Donald Trump in this criminal prosecution is being charged with multiple counts of fictitious business records for evidently paying Michael Cohen for inappropriate services that were not labeled accurately and reported according to New York law. 34 felonies. Trump submitted a request to remove the case from the state level court up to the federal level court, saying that it's justified because it involves federal questions. In Alvin Bragg's prosecution, he's saying that Trump made fictitious business entries because he's trying to skirt around election law. What election? For president. What category is that in? The federal election system. That's a federal issue. So not only is Donald Trump bringing a case where it's alleged that he was violating the law because it was a federal election law, but this also involves a federal question because of the nature of the charges. Donald Trump was running for president. This is a presidential ordeal. And so he should be prosecuted in federal court where he can have some additional privileges and benefits, one of which might be the federal supremacy clause and the focus on federal election integrity or just general national election integrity. And so we're going to take a look very briefly at the Manhattan DA's motion to remand to drop this back into federal court. From federal court into state court. But there are two competing policy issues that are at play here. The federal court wants, or Trump wants to be in federal court because he's going to make the argument that a lower level state prosecutor can't jump in and interfere with a federal process. So, for example, Trump is running for president. That is a federal electoral process that involves the various states voting and then assembling all of the electoral votes into account and electing the next president. If we have a system where somebody is running on a federal ticket and they can be attacked by a bunch of state prosecutors, like is what's happening right now with New York going after Trump, with Georgia, Fani Willis soon to be going after Trump, that is going to harm the federal election. And in this case, Trump is the leading contender for the Republican Party, and he's also been a former president and very likely has a nice shot at winning again. So if the states can interfere with that, at what point does that become interference with the national election? At what point does that be superseded by federal interests? The state, by contrast, is going to say, hey, this is states' rights. We have an interest in protecting the criminal process. We don't want criminals falsifying and making fictitious business records in our states. And so we want the prosecutions to take place. We want control of the proceedings. So Alvin Bragg wants it back down in the states. Donald Trump wants it up in federal court for different reasons, different advantages in both locations. We've already read through Donald Trump's notice of a removal. He's already communicated this belongs in federal court and it's his right to remove it to federal court. Now Alvin Bragg is saying this must be remanded back down. Send this back to New York. Filed May 30th, 40 pages. People of the state of New York versus Donald Trump. This is New York's memorandum of law in support of the motion to send this back down to the New York courts. They say, perhaps the clearest example of state authority is the punishment of criminal activity. They say our state criminal law has primacy, meaning we have interests. And because none of the requirements for federal removal are satisfied, the court should reject Trump's efforts to remove this prosecution from the state. They give us some background. They say, on April 4th, Trump was arraigned in New York, 34 counts falsifying business records. This is based on a scheme allegedly conducted in 2017 to conceal payments. Trump filed a notice of removal saying he satisfied the rules, and they're asking now for a remand. They say this is only available when a federal officer faces criminal charges and identifies a colorable federal offense, a very narrow interpretation. They're pulling that from the Eastern District of New York. They say Trump's inability to satisfy even any one of these prerequisites requires remand, but here he fails all three. They say most fundamentally, Trump's alleged criminal conduct had no connection to his official duties as president, but arose from unofficial actions prior to the election. They say Trump also has invoked no federal defense because no plausible basis creates or invokes immunity. Says in our federal system, The duty of dealing with a crime is preeminently a matter for the states, and because Trump has failed to identify any grounds for removal, you should return this back to the New York State Court. They tell us more about Trump. 500 separate entities. He deliberately separated the Trump org from his presidential functions. He was the sole beneficiary of a trust. From June 2015 to 2016 of November, Trump was a candidate for the presidency. January 20th, he became president. He was indicted in New York, allegedly for concealing criminal conduct, hide damaging information from the voting public. He falsified business records. The people allege that in 2015 August, Trump met in Trump Tower with CEO of AMI, and he paid them off. There were two people that ultimately got paid, Stormy Daniels and somebody else. $130,000 for this. We've already covered all these details. Another $130,000 to adult film actress. Michael Cohen was involved, moving the money around. And a brief pause on this, but recall that the 34 counts, it sounds like a lot. My gosh, 34 counts of felonies? That's a ton of problems. Well, not really. What happened was Michael Cohen would send Trump an invoice. Trump would say, what's this invoice for? They'd put it in their bookkeeping system as an entry, bill from Michael Cohen. Then they would pay that. So invoice, book entry, payment. Invoice, book entry, payment. 3 felonies every time that happens, every month that happens. So you get your Netflix bill, it goes into your bookkeeping, you pay your Netflix bill every month on recurring. Guess what? 3 felonies. So they assembled all of that. They say defendant then reimbursed Cohen through a series of 11 monthly checks. All of that went out, and therefore the grand jury charged him with 34 counts of felonies. They were not legal expenses. They were falsely input on the ledger, and therefore Trump has to be prosecuted. As we conclude, Trump was charged by New York grand jury for crimes for reimbursing his personal lawyer for pre-election expenditures. He doesn't justify the standards for federal removal, and it should be limited. The people's motion for remand should be granted. Send it back down to the states. That came in from Matthew Colangelo, writing for the New York County DA's office. They're out of New York. And so Donald Trump and his team will certainly respond to this, and then there will be a ruling from the court, and we'll be, of course, covering this. Would be a nice removal for Trump, because I think it would allow him to make new arguments and have a different level of proceeding than what he's currently getting out of New York. And of course, we will continue to cover this prosecution. Thank you for liking this video and subscribing wherever it is you are joining us from today, and we'll look forward to see you on the next one.